Hey, warmer friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Brian Butch. I used to join his show when he was hosting out there in Appleton, Wisconsin, the show BJ and the Bear, old 95.3, The Score. Good times out there. He does tremendous work over at Fox Sports. He does a tremendous job as well being able to take a look at this game of college basketball for the Big Ten Network. Have to chat with him about the Big Ten landscape, some of these smaller conference tournament games, and just a few teams in the national landscape that he's feeling bullish/bearish on. And we have to ask which out of the Big Ten teams outside of Michigan might be the biggest threat to be able to make a run in the NCAA tournament. So we'll chat with him about that and so much more. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, we did have a fun day of college basketball on Thursday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Michigan teams were unable to cover the spread. Michigan gets the outright win, but no cover against Iowa, 71-68. The final is for Michigan, 6-12 from three-point range. This was their first game with dealing with the injury to LJ Kaysen, and in this game, Yaxel Lendeborg, Morris Johnson, both give you 16 and 8, 16 points, 8 rebounds for both of those guys. And then you were able to have on the flip side for Iowa, Bennett Sturz do a nice job keeping the team lively. He was able to supply 21 points for Michigan. They win the rebound battle 38-25, but lost the turnover battle 18-5. So Iowa, they're able to get a nice cover, and Iowa has continued to be one of your best cover teams in all of college basketball. With the cover for Iowa now against the spread, they have gone to 20-10 this season, so shout out to them. And then for Michigan State, they get a win, but boy, did this get hairy against Rutgers. This was 31-30 at the half, 60-57 in the second half, 91-87 the final. Just an absolute explosion here. As for Michigan State, Jeremy Fears was able to supply the team with 21 points, 8 rebounds. This was looking like Michigan State had a chance to be able to get close to the cover. They closed as 19.5-point favorites, so they were never quite within the number, but for much of the game, they were up like 15-17 points. As a matter of fact, they were up 19 points, 74-55 with 6 minutes and change remaining, and then Rutgers all of a sudden pulls a bonsai charge and made this game very, very close. As for Rutgers, they do go in this game 10 of 18 from three-point range. They win the turnover battle 15-8, so they did a nice job in terms of being able to just make a nice run in this game. But that said, for Michigan State, they do find a way to be able to close out, get the job done there. Those were your main two ranked teams in action. You had quite a few teams that have been very profitable against the spread this season in action, and Sam Houston State has been one of them. They entered in the day on Thursday as one of your best teams in all of college basketball at 19-7 against the spread, now 19-8 against the spread. They do not get the job done against Delaware. As Delaware, they get an 83-81, another game that exploded in the second half, 50-47. Delaware outscores Sam Houston State, as Sam Houston State goes 11 of 27 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for Delaware, 14 out of 27 from three-point range. Justin Fernandez, 26 points. For Delaware, they play even up with the turnover battle, 10-10. And for Sam Houston State, they do shoot just 41% from the floor. So one of your most profitable teams in all of college basketball, not so profitable on this day. It's been interesting to look at Navy, 29-1 against the spread. The Patriot League action, it is very, very hot and heavy, and for them, they needed a second half rally to be able to overcome Bucknell. They don't get the cover, 74-69. The final for Bucknell, 11 of 29 from three-point range. Navy, 11 of 23. As a man that came up big for them, Cam Cole, off the bench, 3 blocks. He goes 16 points, 4 of 8 from three-point range. For Navy, they do go 15 of 20 at the free throw line. And Bucknell, shout out to them, 6 of 6 at the free throw line, but Navy unable to get the cover in that game. Another team has been very rock solid against the spread all season long has been North Dakota State. The Bison are 18-12 against the spread this season. The Summit League Conference Tournament is on 76-65. They do get the job done against Oral Roberts. It's dependent upon your number. In a lot of places, Oral Roberts, they were closing as right in that neighborhood of about like a 11 to an 11.5 point underdog, even 12.5. This opened up in some places as low as 8.5. So it very much depended upon your number there, but on a lot of closing numbers. You were able to get there with Oral Roberts, but North Dakota State, they do find a way to be able to survive and advance in that conference tournament. As for Oral Roberts, 13 out of 35 from three-point range, but they did lose their turnover battle 17-8, and for North Dakota State, Damari Wheeler-Thomas, 18 points. Currently doing this as you have St. Thomas currently taking care of business against South Dakota State, 80-67. They were able to get the win. They were able to get the cover in that game, and for St. Thomas, they've been a team that has been pretty rock solid all season long against the spread. They're now above 500 with that regard, so should be fun to see what we get in that conference tournament. Additionally, we had the Missouri Valley Conference tournament get started, and it's very infamous for unders. First two games go very clearly under the total. Northern Iowa versus Evansville, if you took the light number, you were able to get over on that game. 68-59 the final. I believe that got as low as about 125.5, 126.5, so that was one where you should have gotten there on most numbers. I think that a few places actually close 127.5, but still for Northern Iowa, unable to cover the spread as they go 6-28 from three-point range. Evansville, they go 9-25 from three-point range. That was an intriguing one. Northern Iowa, they find a way to survive and advance. So does Valparaiso, 63-62 against Indiana State. Indiana State was surprisingly a really good against the spread team this season for Indiana State. They finish up the year 17-12-1 against the spread. For Valparaiso, they find a way, despite the fact that they go 13-22 at the free throw line, because they won the turnover battle 14-8. And for Indiana State, they do shoot 46% from the floor. Valparaiso, 37%, but the turnovers were the big key in that one. And for Southern Illinois, they have been an amazing under team all season long, and 67-63, they get driven down by Drake. Drake is able to find a way to be able to persevere, get the job done out there, and that means that they were able to play yet another under to wrap up the season for Southern Illinois, by the way. If you want to know how good the unders were for them this season, 9 overs at 22 unders. So, yeah, that was a pretty disgusting game, to say the least, and if you're looking at your top overall under teams in all of college basketball, the best one that was in action was Southern Illinois, but still, you've got a few other teams. UT Martin, 9 overs at 20 unders, and you are going to be able to bet them at the very minimum once more as they survive and they advance in the Ohio Valley Conference Tournament. 66-63, they get the job done against Eastern Illinois. This was a closing total in a lot of places that was right around 126.5, so you should have been able to get the over there. As for UT Martin, they go just 8-29 from three-point range, but 14 of 18 at the free throw line. They did a nice job winning the turnover battle 12-10, so they find a way there. And then in the other OVC matchup, you did see Southeast Missouri State take down Lindenwood 68-66. This was very much a nip and tuck game. Lindenwood was up 9 points at the half, and they just all of a sudden blew the game. They were actually up a pair with about a minute remaining. Southeast Missouri State, they're able to get the final 4 points of the game. They find a way to be able to persevere and advance in this conference tournament, so that's another one that is going to be very intriguing. And we also have some intrigue with regards to some of these Big West teams as well. Some of them have been up and down. Now, I am doing this as we don't know the result out there in Hawaii, but Seton has been a relatively profitable team, unable to get the job done against the Meep Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunners. That was an 86-84 final, and for Northridge, they have been one of your top teams out there in the conference. Now 13-15 against the spread, though, so they've been a little bit rough there, and Bakersfield has not been making money whatsoever. They're now 10-17-1 against the spread with this cover. You saw UC Irvine absolutely take it to Cal Poly by a count of 107-85, so the Cal Poly team has been playing very up-tempo all season long. They're able to cash you yet another over in that game, and if you are taking a look at what we're all getting in terms of these conference tournaments as well, Southern Miss, they do find a way to be able to get past James Madison, 86-80 final in that one, and James Madison did wrap up the season as one of the lesser teams against the spread in all of college basketball, 13-19 against the spread. Georgia Southern, they live to be able to see another day, and also being able to see another day, Georgia Southern as a 6.5 point underdog, 80-77. They do find a way against Arkansas State, so that was a very nice win for them as well. And then we did see Portland be able to put Pepperdine out of their misery, 70-68. Currently doing this as we don't know the results of San Diego versus Loyola Marymount. San Diego actually had the lead in the first half, so that one is a little bit TBD as well, but we've got ourselves some great conference tournament action, including Lehigh hitting a half-court buzzer beater. They don't cover the spread of 5, but they take down Holy Cross 69-66. The final, Colgate did get a cover against Loyola Maryland, 90-77 final in that one. In Boston U, they did survive an advance against American, 75-73, so we got a lot out there. And then how about the Metro Atlantic? We haven't brought them up for the Metro Atlantic. Every single team has played more unders than overs, but you had an overwhelming game between Iona and Sacred Heart, 91-80. Sacred Heart as the underdog, they do find a way to be able to get it done, so Iona after they went to the conference tournament final last season. They can their coach own the first round this season, so can't help but think a little bit of poetic justice there. And for Sacred Heart, they went in this game 13 out of 37 for three-point range, 8 of 31 for Iona, so that very much killed them. And then for Fairfield, they take down Manhattan by a count of 71-60. That's the final in that one. And for Manhattan, just not a great defensive team all season long, a team that had some disappointments against the spread. They wrap up the year 11-19-1 against the spread. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting in college basketball right now, it has been all about unders and underdogs thus far this season, though we haven't seen the favorites picking up a little bit of steam here over the last few days, with favorites against the spread at 48.3%. They were picking up steam prior to Thursday, and Thursday's action that went back downward. Underdogs over the last 7 days, 168 and 157 against the spread, and the unders hitting at 53.2%, 173 unders to 152 overs. If you look at the entirety of the basketball season, the underdogs are hitting in that neighborhood about 51.3%, 2,715, 2,573 against the spread, and then 2,685 unders to 2,604 overs. That is a 50.8% hit rate to the under. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now. That's where we're all getting tournament-wise. Coming up next, how about if we do chat with our good friend Brian Butch of the Big Ten Network right here on Coast to Coast with myself, David Peterson, a part of the Peterson Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Gibbs Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Brian Butch aboard. I remember back in the day, I used to do weekly appearances on BJ and the Butch out there in the great city of Appleton, Wisconsin. He does a great job, Brian does, as a college basketball analyst. He's over there at Fox Sports, the Big Ten Network. He's a former Wisconsin Badger and formerly of, I believe, Appleton West, which is actually where my mother went to high school as well. So we've got a lot of connections there. One of the legends of the Fox Valley. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter /X at Brian and underscore his last name Butch and then the number 32 all together. And Brian, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always great to be back. And yes, Appleton West is that old. I'm not calling your mom old though, Greg. It's just old. It doesn't have AC. And, it's a little run down, but hey, it toughens you up a little bit.
Absolutely, it does. And my goodness, we've got ourselves a great landscape right now. And just how do you take a look at this time in college basketball? Because for the power conferences, we're in the last game or two of conference play. And then obviously the smaller conferences out there in your neck of the woods, the Horizon League and the Missouri Valley Conference, the smaller conference tournaments are now getting started up.
Yeah, I think that's the toughest thing about it is obviously you're still watching the big conferences to see which teams are trending the right way. I know when you look at seeding, it doesn't matter based on what everyone tells us, but I'm going to tell you right now, you want teams trending the right direction versus the other way around. And you got a team out there in Cincinnati that is playing some really good basketball. They don't have a great body of work. Can they make a run? Can they find their way into the tournament? They're going to have to beat TCU. They're going to have to get some big wins in their conference play, but that's a team that might, do some damage. So you got to keep an eye on some of those teams that going into it, you didn't think you were going to have to pay any attention to. And that's what makes this fun if you're a junkie.
Oh, it certainly is. And how about if first things first, we take a little bit of a look at the Big Ten and then we do dive in on some of those other conferences as well. And just how do you take a look at this landscape? Because we are doing this before the Michigan and Michigan State games on Thursday. But that said, it has been a really interesting conference where it does feel like there's a pretty big middle and some teams like a team that you're very familiar with, the Wisconsin Badgers, that it feels like they can beat anyone on any given day. But at the same time, a lot of these teams, it feels like they can lose lose to anyone on any given day as well.
Well, and I think that's the biggest thing. You look at Michigan with the 2 losses, one against Duke, that they just didn't play that well. I thought Duke played well, and I mean, it's still a 68-63 game, and Michigan just didn't play. The injury to LJ Casey, I think that's a bigger deal than what people are saying. Now, the depth of Michigan's been really good, but you've got Wisconsin in there. They can go ahead. They can beat anybody. They also can lose to anybody. You've got Iowa, who's struggling here of late, but their style of play, slow it down, grind you out, is really tough when you look at what they can do. The team like Purdue, what is Purdue? I think that's the biggest question about this Big Ten right now is they have the experience. They're, preseason number 1. They've got everything that you need. You've got an All-American point guard. Now, he's not playing like an All-American point guard right now, but you have an All-American point guard. You've got post presence, and they're just not performing. They barely squeeze one out against Northwestern, and I just think I'll be in West Lafayette a Saturday as the Badgers take on Purdue, and I'm really interested to see that group up close because I don't know if they've got it, and my trust level right now is fading. I still thought this team was a Final Four team based on what they have experience-wise, but they've got to play better, and it's got to start with Brandon Smith. And then another team that's interesting to me is UCLA. What's UCLA? They're starting to play some better basketball. You've got the bubble teams as far as Ohio State and Indiana. Are they going to be part of this? And then Nebraska's a team that I, for the majority of the season, considered them upper echelon in what they were doing. I thought offensively they did some really good stuff. Defensively, they trap from the bottom. Their rotations are really hard to guard. And I think the Big Ten itself has figured out what they're doing. But you don't play the Big Ten. You don't play the Big Ten in the NCAA tournament. And I think Nebraska will tap into some of that as well just because it's a different look. So it's a weird league. Michigan was the best team all year long. It wasn't even close. I said that in early February, and it was true. The rest of the league is so interesting. I think Illinois can make a deep run. I really do. If I'm going to pick 2 teams that make this work, it's Michigan, Illinois out of this. I think there's some Sweet 16 teams in there. I think Wisconsin could be a Sweet 16 team. I think Michigan State could be a Sweet 16 team as well.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I think that Michigan State has a great potential to be able to go far in the NCAA tournament. And out of those teams, would you say that perhaps Michigan State does have the highest upside? Because I do think that on neutral courts, having that level of defense, that travels really well. And we've already seen them play incredibly hard against Duke earlier in the season, shut down an offense like in Arkansas. I think that in an NCAA tournament setting, out of all those teams that you mentioned, I feel best about Michigan State making a deep run.
See, and this is where I'm skewed a little bit, Greg, because I saw Michigan State absolutely get walloped at Madison, and I was live, and it was the first time that in my entire life, even when I played against Michigan State, that it was a Michigan State team that was just out of place. They didn't play hard. They didn't compete. It really was unbelievable. And my question there, and they couldn't manufacture any offense whatsoever. And I think that's the biggest thing that I look at with it and say, if Jeremy Fears is taken out of the game, now it's a big if. I mean, the guy averages 9+ assists, all the above. But if he's taken out of the game, where's the offense come from with this Michigan State team? Yes, they can defend, but that's my biggest question mark is if somehow Jeremy Fears is contained, where does it come? And that's the scary part. I think they're still a Sweet 16 team, but it's going to be stuck in my head. I just love what Illinois is about. I just do. I know they don't. Here recently, there's a couple of games that haven't gone their way. Mainly that UCLA game. They're winning leading that thing the majority, and all of a sudden they go coast to coast, and they don't finish the little things there. But elite guard play, and they've got the bigs to match with what the front line of a lot of other teams have. I just think there's something that they can tap into.
Yep, I think so as well, and I do think that it's going to be fun to be taking a look at them moving forward as Brian Butch. He does such great work over at Fox Sports, the Big Ten Network, and so much more. He's joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and no doubt about it, we have to talk about the Wisconsin Badgers because I think that they're one of the highest variance teams in all of college basketball. They could easily flame out in the first round and lose a game by double figures. Yeah. They could easily knock off any team in all of college basketball as well because we saw what they were able to do to Michigan earlier in the season as well. Just how do you take a look at this Badgers team since I know you've seen them very much up close and in person?
Yeah, I think this is the biggest thing. They are who they are. Now you're getting the casual fans that jump in and they're asking, well, why this team defensively? There's no getting better. It's March 5th. You're not going to get better. You are who you are. Your body of work is out there. This team is not an elite defensive team. They just aren't. They're scoring well. Their transition opportunities with Nick Boyd gives them that. Their spacing gives them that. Braden Carrington here, and this is the X factor. Braden Carrington's been playing so much better. He's drilling shots. He's creating more space. Now, there was a little bit of scare last night as Nolan Winter went down with an ankle injury that could have been severe. It sounds like as we speak, Thursday, March 5th, that ankle injury is more of a day-to-day ankle injury for this Wisconsin team. Nolan Winter's been extremely consistent in the post for this team as far as rebounding the basketball. He also gives them some spacing opportunities on the floor offensively. And when you have 5 players on the floor that can shoot it, you're in the game. Unfortunately for this Wisconsin team, they're going to live by the 3 and they're going to die by the 3. And I think that's the toughest thing. I'm going to roll my dice, and I'm going to pick the Badgers to go pretty far unless there's some crazy bracket seeding where you look at it with them being the 3 seed and them catching a BYU team last year that was a 6 seed that never truly should have been a 6 seed. That one you just knew was not setting up right. But I like what this team can do. And here's the X factor. Every big game that they've been in, they've shown up. And I think that's the biggest thing. At Michigan, at Illinois. Saturday will be interesting at Purdue, but they've been in these big games, and they've answered the call to the big games. So I do think they put together a deep run.
Yep, and with Wisconsin, it's going to be very dependent upon the draw, and that's always any team in March. Let's call it what it is.
Correct.
You always try to make any sort of prognostication about these teams, but if you get a bad draw, you get a bad draw. If you get a good draw, you get a good draw.
Greg, I think there's probably 5 that you look at and say, I don't really care what the draw is, right? I think it's Michigan. I think it's Arizona. I think it's UConn, Florida, and Duke. Right? Like those are the 5 that you look at and say, okay, I don't know if it's really going to matter. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I thought this thing was wide open. I thought this was, there's going to be 12 to 14 teams that had a chance. And now it's really looking like there's probably 5 teams that have a legit chance. But that's why you play the game. That to me is the exciting thing about what this March Madness team is. Florida, are their guards good enough? That's the question that's out there. Recently, they have been. Michigan, what's the injury with Case? Arizona, can their young players, put it together? Even though they've got some experience, they rely a little bit on freshmen. And how does that play out? Duke, again, can they get enough shooting? So there's weaknesses. They're not a lot. I'm being really picky when I talk about those 5, but that's just kind of my overall thoughts on it.
Oh, I'm right there with you, and I do think that this is going to be a lot of fun to take a look at, to say the least, as we've got a lot of intriguing teams out there in the Big Ten. And just when you take a look at the national landscape, is there a team or two maybe outside the Big Ten that you have your eye on? Maybe they're outside that like tier 1 that we were mentioning with Arizona, Duke, what have you, but you feel like they might be a little bit dangerous and they might be coming on strong here towards the back half of the season. The
one that jumps out to me is Texas Tech. I just with the injury, I think a lot of people forgot about them. And they find ways. They're just a tough-minded team. And are they going to be able to put it together for a national championship? No. With Toppin, did I think they were national championship contenders? I did, but I still think they have a chance to make a deep run. Kansas is a team that is so unique, but I can't, Darren Peterson is a unique player. Obviously, he's in, he's out. We're doing all that stuff. Now he's just kind of sitting in the corner. He's used to be an elite defender. He's not really even doing that right now. But all of a sudden, if this thing turns in the tournament, can they put it together? Absolutely, this Kansas team can put it together. And I would say the last one that I jump out on, I talked briefly Purdue. I throw Purdue in there. But outside of that, I'm looking at this Iowa State team and just how they play and what they're able to do with the threes that they shoot. I think they've got the potential too.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And for Kansas, they need to figure out how to utilize that guy with the last name Peterson because, man, that has been up, down, all around, to say the least. So that has been very intriguing. And, Brian, we are currently looking at a lot of mid-major conference tournaments as well. And are there any of these conference tournaments that are going on right now / will be getting started in the next few days that you want to keep your eye on, whether it's a candidate for having a lot of chaos in there, or maybe there's a team or two in a lower league that you've seen this far this season that you think could be able to pull an upset in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of them. When you look at just in general, the first one that I've obviously a little bit, biased to watch is this Horizon League with the whole way that the league's set up, and now with Green Bay playing some really good basketball. That plays a big factor as far as what they're trying to do. And obviously you've got Doug Gottlieb and what he can do that I think can play a factor in how this plays out, because I just, it's a great storyline for everything that it is. Obviously, Miami of Ohio, I don't like the conversation of them not being in if they don't win out. Like, I just don't think that's in play. I think it's one of those that we shouldn't be having. Like, this is what college basketball should be about. So I think that's one that I look at. I do think St. Louis is in play. The one that's interesting to me is the VCU, because I think if VCU gets in, nobody wants to play VCU. Nobody wants to play them, but I don't know if they get in. And then the last one that I've kind of really been somewhat impressed with is Belmont, as far as just kind of what they could do type deal. Those are the kind of ones that jump out, and I hope we have more of them. I hope we have chaos, because I think it would be great for college basketball. Because of NIL, a lot of people are saying we're not going to have it. You play 40 minutes. So I hope there's more chaos, just because it is one of those things. I don't want the common fan to say, what about these guys? Or, hey, we're never going to have those upsets again. That's not good for the game.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And I do have to bring this up as well, since they are going to be in action on Friday. What is currently your take on Miami of Ohio? Because I'm seeing a lot of people that I don't think that they knew what quad one wins were about 2 weeks ago, trying to bring up quad one wins. You're a man that has played the sport. To me, it just really rubs me the wrong way when I see a lot of people saying, oh, anyone with that schedule could go 30-0. And I feel like you're probably going to take my side on this one, having played the game, that what Miami of Ohio is doing should not be diminished and very much should be just celebrated for what they've been able to do with a spot in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think the best thing was Bruce Pearl talking about Miami of Ohio, because now all of a sudden you have the nepotism and the we conversations coming out, because Auburn's a bubble team. And now all of a sudden it brings the eyes a little bit to say, hey, this kind of is unfair. This Miami of Ohio team has beaten a lot of teams, and they found ways to continue to go undefeated. And I think that's the biggest thing that I look at with it. They have not lost. I don't care who's on the schedule. You're going to have bad nights. You're going to have close games. And they still find a way to do that. And I know it's one of those things that, you look at it and you say, okay, they haven't necessarily played who we would have loved to see them play in MAC schools. I know a lot of Big Ten teams play them. For some reason they didn't. The reason they didn't play them, because they're experienced. And early on in the season, you don't want to play a mid-major with experience, because you're not experienced. When you look at most of the rosters throughout the conference, especially Big Ten country, like, they're all new. It takes time to gel. Miami of Ohio was not all new. They had a lot of returners, and then because of that, you're not able to get games, and now all of a sudden you've got a tough job there. And I think that's the thing that I look at this. I'll say this. I hope they win the conference tournament. I hope this, we're not having to have this conversation. But if they do not win that conference tournament, they should be in. And if not, there should be uproar. To me, this is what college basketball is about. They've gotten here so far. They have not lost. They deserve to be in this tournament.
Yep, I'm right there with you. It's going to be very interesting to see what we get the next few weeks. And Brian, you do such a great job gauging this great sport of college basketball. Love the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, they can follow me at Brian_Butch32. Also follow Butchie's Den, which is a little podcast we got going on. Greg, you jumped on. I appreciate that. I just dropped one today with the former Wisconsin head coach Bo Ryan, my former coach and now Hall of Famer. We sat there and chatted up a little bit about where he thinks the game is, which was really interesting coming from an old school guy, his approach on NIL. So make sure you check that out on YouTube at Butchie's Den or Brian_Butch32.
Brian does such an incredible job gauging this game of college basketball over at the Big Ten Network, Fox Sports, and so much more. And it was great to get him aboard today. So big thanks to Brian for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Friday as the It's Make Shot. Back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Well, it's great to get the polar bear Brian Butch aboard. He is a legend out there in the Fox Cities area of Wisconsin, which is where I grew up. He actually went to high school only a few miles away from where I grew up as a kid. I remember joining his show back when he was doing some local radio in the great state of Wisconsin. A really good college basketball analyst, a really good guy. So it was great to get him aboard today. Big thanks to Brian for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is incredibly convoluted right here. We've got a few bigger games that are not a part of conference tournaments. Those are the MAC games, the Big East, the Mountain West, and then it's in tip time in terms of these conference tournaments. So the Missouri Valley is up first, then we go to the Coastal Conference, then we go from there to the SoCon, the Metro Atlantic, the Sun Belt, the Summit League, the OVC, the West Coast Conference, and then you've got the extra games, the Atlantic Sun, and the Big South. So I put the order of the games in the description on the old Twitter/X, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this, to make things a bit easier. So let's get things started. 8:25, 8:26. It is Akron, and they are going to be playing us to Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois is an underdog of 22 to 22.5 points. So on game 154.5. I like the over. I set my total 159.5. This is a Northern Illinois team that has not been great, to say the least. On defense, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, it is a unit that is 298th, and they are really allowing a lot of opportunities down low, to 331st in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, Northern Illinois, they're outside the top 340 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis themselves, because they have just been turning the ball over left and right. 361st in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. You have an Akron team that also goes bombs away from three. They shoot 38.2% from three-point range overall. That goes up to 39.5% when they're at home. And it is an Akron team that's looking to push some tempo. In terms of total possessions per game, 58th in all of college basketball. You've got Tavari Johnson, who's been able to lead the way with a little bit over 20 points per contest. He's been shooting darn near 40 or so percent from three-point. I think that's down to 38, but Amani Lyles is able to give you 15 points, 7.5 boards. Oh, yes, and Akron, also a top 45 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound as well. So they are giving themselves second and third chances. Scott has been able to throw in their 13 points. He shoots 42.5% from three. Eric Mahaffey shoots 40% from three. Weapons upon weapons. And for Northern Illinois, it's been a little bit less than savory, to say the least. Now, I did set my line at 21.5, so I am going to be willing to take 22 plus, as you do have Mekhi Valentine along Dylan Newcomen, who've been able to combine for about 21 points per contest, and Valentine is shooting 36% from three-point range. You've got Gianni Cobb, who's been able to give you about 10 points, 4 assists per contest. Again, the turnovers have been absolutely awful for this team. They're not the world's worst three-point shooting defense. They're inside the top 225 with that regard, and they've been okay in terms of getting to the free throw line. Problem is they do shoot 66.7% at the charity stripe, but a top 200 team themselves in terms of percentage of missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound, as you've got Taj Walters, who's been able to give you 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then you've been able to have a little bit more out of Gustav Winthrop, who's been able to throw in there 8 points per game. I think that the number's gone up a little bit too lofty, as it is an Akron team that has had a few struggles on defense. They're still relatively solid, but in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this team is right around 108th. So I did set my line at a 21.5, 22 plus, taking the points with Northern Illinois, and I'm going to be in on the over. So my total at a 159.5, 827, 828. Bowling Green is going to be on the road. They're facing off against Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan, a home underdog of 3.5 points, and your total, it is 141.5, and I did set my line at 3.5. I'm seeing a 3 out there. I'm willing to lay 3 and not a half a point more with Bowling Green. Bowling Green has been able to do a very solid job in terms of generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, this defense ranks right around about 71st in all of college basketball and games played away from home. That does go into the top 65, and Eastern Michigan has been a solid defense, a top 225 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. As a matter of fact, 173rd. They're just really not getting anything going on offense whatsoever. They do shoot 34.4% from three-point range at home, but they have some turnover issues. You only have 2 guys that are giving you over 7.5 points per game. As a result, you've got this team at 296th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They did have a third double-figure scorer, but Carlos Hart, he was a part of that FBI probe. That is just not great, to say the least. You've got Mohamed Habab along with Addison Patterson. They combine for about 28 points per game. These 2 guys shoot less than 30% from 3. Now, you've got Gregory Lawson, who's been able to shoot 44% from the outside, 7 points per game. Gustav Nawabi has been able to give you about 5.5 2.5 boards per contest, as well as it's been an Eastern Michigan team that's been right around about 180th with regards to rebound percentage. It's a Bowling Green team that does a solid job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. They're a pretty rock solid team on the glass in the top 125 there, top 55 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Javonte Campbell, I think, is going to be the best player in this game, as he's been able to supply 18.5 points, 5 assists, 5 boards, and then you've had Sam Towns be able to throw in there about 7 rebounds, 12 points per game. Meyer Wool is a 40% three-point shooter. He throws in there about 10.5 points per game, and with Bowling Green, if they do need to cover at the free throw line, they shoot about 73.5% while they're there. This Bowling Green team just hair outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they're a top 125 team with their two-point shooting percentage, top 175 unit with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. I think that that's enough to be able to get the job done, and what I think is going to be a little bit of a underwhelming game. Eastern Michigan not necessarily playing at a fast, simple 196 in terms of total possessions per game, so made a total of 139.5. I like the under, and with Bowling Green, we'll delay up to 3 with them. A 29-830 VCU is going to be on the road against Dayton, and Dayton does find themselves as a favorite here of 1.5 points. It's on this game 148.5 to 149.5. I made VCU the 3.5 point favorite, so I am going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. With Dayton, they have been really good in terms of generating turnovers. They're 7th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but if they don't generate a turnover, they're right around about 257th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a VCU team that has been able to do a very rock solid job with their 3-point shooting. Overall, they're at 36.3%. That is a top 50 mark in all of college basketball, and this is a very well-rounded team. You've got Terrence Hill, who's been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to give this team right around about 14.5 points per game, but then you've got Laser Djokovic, who stands right around about 6'10". He's supplied the team with 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, and VCU also doing a nice job in terms of fighting for second and third chances, and that's something that Dayton does not do. It's a Dayton squad that rebounds only 25.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, 284th in all of college basketball. VCU, they're currently checking in at 58th. You've got the likes of Nick Lewis along with Brandon Jennings, who have both been able to give you about 9 points per contest. J.D. Tracy, he throws in their 10 points per game. Meanwhile, for Dayton, you do have Amir Latang. He's about 7'1", and he's been able to give you about 5.5 boards, 12.5 points per game. Javon Bennett and Deshaun Montgomery are your main two guys. They combine for about 30 points per game, both shooting the mid-30s from 3, but it's a Dayton team that they themselves have taken a little bit of a fall off with their 3-point shooting. They're outside the top 150 in all of college basketball. They're only about 157th overall in terms of points per possession. They're pretty strong down low. They're a top 125 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, with Keontae Jones being able to throw in there about 8 points, 5.5 boards, about a steal and a half per contest, but with VCU being able to dominate down low, and with VCU being a team that's relatively okay in terms of taking care of the ball. They are turning the ball over about 11 times per contest, top 130 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're a top 10 team in terms of free throw attempts per game. I think that that's enough to be able to get the job done. So set VCU as a favorite of 3.5 points, like them on the money line. So I told 149.5, so 149 or less, like the over. 831, 832 is Columbia, and they're going to be on the road against Harvard. Harvard is a favorite here of 3.5 to 4.5 points. 132.5 to 133.5 is the total, and I did set Harvard as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points here with Columbia. Columbia has been a very strong team on the glass. They're a top 30 team with regards to defensive rebound percentage, and they're a good 3-point shooting team, and legitimately both of these teams have been able to do a nice job from the outside. Right now with Columbia, they are 49th in the country. They shoot 36.3% from 3, actually goes up to 36.4% in games played away from home. Harvard, they're about 34.8%. That's a top 145 mark in the country. Now with Harvard, where they're really going to have an undoing is that they just don't give themselves any sort of second and third chances. 290th in the country with regards to offensive rebound percentage. Columbia, they're doing a much better job at 55th. Now, I will say this about Harvard. If you do find yourself in a nip and tuck spot with them, this team has been absolutely incredible at the free throw line, while Columbia is not. Columbia shoots only about 70.5% at the free throw line. Harvard, they're second in the country. They shoot 80.5% at the charity stripe. It is a Harvard team as well outside the top 330 in terms of total possessions per game, so that's why I did set a little bit of a lower total here, but that's it for Harvard. You've got a really nice starting five with this team, as you've had Robert Hinton and Hard with about 17 points per contest. He's only shooting about 32% from 3-point range, but that said, he's been able to throw in there about 5 boards per contest. Tay Barber has been able to give you about 5 boards, 13.5 points per game. Thomas Beatties, he's been able to give you 12.5 points. He shoots 46% from 3-point range. And then on the flip side for Columbia, you've had Kenny Nolan be really the main guy for this team. As Nolan, right now, he is supplying you with about 17 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists from 3-point range. He shoots 38.5%. Blair Thompson has been a 42% 3-point shooter at about 6'8", throws in there about 11 points per game. Now, Columbia has been very sloppy with the ball. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They really don't put you under duress either, but very good on the inside. Top 125 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, top 200 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And Harvard, they're outside the top 200 with regards to turnovers generated as well. So do think that you're going to get a little bit of a nip and tuck game here. I did set my line at 2.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Columbia. And I did set a total of 134.5. I think we've gone a little bit too low with the way that these teams shoot from three and the free throws that you might get at the end of this game. So like the over animal and take the points with Columbia. 833, 834. Penn is going to be on the road against Brown. And what can Brown do for you? Well, they don't get blown out. They're going to make you money. They're between 3 and 3.5 point home underdogs. So on this game, 141.5. And I set Penn as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 3 and 3.5, mainly because with this Brown team, just not really getting anything going on offense whatsoever. And games played at home, 350th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now it's a Yale squad that has been able to do a very good job from 3-point range. They are 15th in the country. They shoot 38.2% from 3-point range. Not so strong on the inside. They're on 41st with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. And this has been a Brown team that has been good with their perimeter defense at home. They are allowing teams to shoot 30.2% from 3-point range, but very hard to be able to trust in this offense, as right now you've got one made double-figure score in Landon Lewis, give you about 16.5 points, 7 boards. He shoots 43% from 3, but less than a 3 per contest. Jeremiah Jenkins has been solid, 8.5 points, 4 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals per contest, and then Adrian Ochindino has been able to give you about 9.5 points per game, but even if you're in a pressure spot for Brown, they shoot just 68.9% at the free throw line. That's a little bit of an issue, and they're outside the top 275 with their own 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for Penn, you've got probably the best 2 players out there on the floor, as you've been able to have TJ Power be able to supply you with just under 19 points per contest from 3-point range. He's been able to shoot right around about 42% from 3. Ethan Roberts, 17 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists. He shoots 40% from 3. And then I like Michael Zanoni, 11.5 points. He shoots 38% from 3-point range. It's a Penn team that has been a top 175 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage. Now, they themselves shoot 68.5% the free throw line. That hovers right around about 300th in all of college basketball. And they do give up a lot of looks on the inside, but they're also a top 75 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Neither of these teams are really looking to push a ridiculous tempo. As for Penn, they're in terms of total possessions per game, 175th. Brown, they're checking in 235th. So I like the under, so I total 136. And with Penn, I'm willing to lay it, set them as a 4-point favorite, 835, 836. You've got Central Michigan, and they're going to be on the road facing off against Ball State. Ball State, a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 136.5. Made my total 136. So 136.5, bare minimum buy point here on the under. You've got a Central Michigan team that feels like they're doing a little bit better right now, but still, it's been a team that's been very sloppy in offense. They're outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and have a Ball State team that really isn't doing much right, but you've got one good thing with this team. They generate turnovers. You look at them in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, 72nd in all of college basketball. In their home games, that goes up to the top 65, and for Central Michigan, they're going to be looking to be able to pound the ball down low. Nathan Clearbody is a true 7-footer. He's been really the main guy for this team. Right now, supplies you with about 13 points, throws in there 5.5 boards, so he's been solid there. And Tamaro Adley has been able to come on strong. He's now the team's top scorer, shoots 36.5% from 3, 13 points per game. And Central Michigan here in conference play, up to 36% 3-point shooting. Problem is, they've also been shooting about 69% the free throw line. They have been losing the rebound battle line. So this is a team that's towards the bottom of the MAC in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, outside the top 275. And that's a big reason why I did set Ball State here as the favorite of 2 points. I don't want to go past the 1.5, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. With Ball State, you don't have a single guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. That said, you've had Armani Ziegler be a little bit of a do-it-all sort of combo player, 12.5 points, 5 boards, 3 assists per contest, and the Davion Hill shoots about 32% from 3-point. She's up to 13 points. Devin Barnes has been able to give you about 34% 3-point shooting. Now, in a pressure spot, Ball State pretty much shoots the same free throw shooting percentage as Central Michigan. They're up to 69.5%. They've been awful inside. They're outside the top 300 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. In terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, though, they're inside the top 250. I do think that with the way that they generate turnovers and don't allow a ton of second and third chances, meanwhile, Central Michigan just absolutely getting destroyed on the glass. In terms of defense rebound percentage, well outside the top 300, that's just enough for Ball State to be able to get the job done. Should be a low-tempo game with Ball State in terms of total possessions per game. They're checking in right around about 318. So semi-total 136 at the 136.5 in on the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 1.5 here with Ball State. 837, 838, you've got Western Michigan, and they're going to be on the road. They're facing off against Kent State. Kent State does find themselves as a sizable favorite here, as you're going to be laying with them 10.5 to 11 points. So on this game, it is 158 to 158.5, and with Kent State, made them an 11.5 point favorite. I'm not willing to go past an 11, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. Kent State has some of the biggest wackadoo home and road splits that you're going to find in all of college basketball, and are absolutely gunning it. Kent State, Currently, in terms of total possessions per game, they are in the top 15 in all of college basketball. You've got on the flip side a bunch in Western Michigan that they're relatively mid-tempo, but Western Michigan not taking care of the ball outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, Kent State, they're right around about 300th as well, even though you've got Seton Medley give you about 6 assists per game. He's been able to throw in their double figures. He has been turning the ball over a little bit more than what you'd like, but they're going to be able to win this battle down low with Delreco Gillespie, one of the top rebounders outside of the power conferences, 18.5 points, 11.3 boards. He gives you a block and a half per contest, and then Morgan Safford has been the head of the snake with regards to three-point shooting at about 36% from the outside, 14 points, 5.5 boards. For Kent State, shoots over 38% from three-point range at home, less than 30% away from home. Good at getting to the free throw line. They're a top 15 team with regards to their free throw shooting percentage. They shoot about 71.2% at the charity stripe, and then for Western Michigan, they've been much better on offense ever since they got Justice Williams, who's been able to give you 15.5 points, shoots 37.5% for three. Jalen Griffith, he's a 40.5% three-point shooter. He's been able to give you about 12 points per game. It's a Western Michigan team that is in the top 150 in terms of overall rebound percentage, but they're not putting teams under duress whatsoever. So a Kent State team that's had turnovers all season long. Western Michigan outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, just getting tattooed on defense. They're outside the top 310 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. So do you think that you get an up and down game here? Did set a total of a 161.5. I'm going to be in on the over and with Kent State, one to lay up to 11 with them. 839, 840. You've got Buffalo on the road against Toledo. 7.5 to 8.5 point favorites. So this game, 152.5 to 154.5, and I made Toledo the 5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Buffalo. With the Bulls, they've actually traveled really well this season. It's a Buffalo team that's not going to put you under too much stress in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're hovering right around about 93rd in all of college basketball, and it's a Toledo team that, for lack of a better term, they have been gambling for turnovers, even though they're only like 100th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. When they don't generate a turnover, they leave themselves very, very vulnerable in terms of their outside shooting. Again, with Buffalo, even though they're outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, much better when they're away from home. Buffalo at home is allowing teams to shoot 37% from three. That goes down to 32.6% when they're away from home. Meanwhile, you've got a Toledo team that, well, they're getting destroyed on the defensive side of things. 242nd in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, outside the top 290 in terms of two-point shooting percentage. They've been a team that has been rough on the glass. Even though you do have a little bit of size on this team, you've got a guy that comes in Austin Parks, who's a 6'10" big man, who's giving you about 11 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. But it's all about Sonny Wilson, Leroy Blyden Jr. These two guys combined for 33.5 points, both shoot 38 to 39.5% from three-point range. And then Kyler Vanderjagt, he's been a 38% three-point shooter for this team as well. Meanwhile, for Buffalo, it's been a little bit rough for them as they've been dealing with an injury to their top scorer, as Daniel Freitag. Overall for the season gives you 19.5 points per game. He did come back in that game against Akron, but missed their previous game as well. So I'm thinking if he plays, he's probably not going to be 100%. Ryan Sable, though, he is going to be 100%. Shoots 40% from three, 18.5 points per game. And Buffalo overall, top 80 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're shooting about 38% from three. That's the top 25 mark in the country. Do not come up with second and third chances. They're outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but with the way that this team is relatively okay on the turnover front, I do think that that's going to be able to keep them lively in Toledo again. Just not playing a lot of defense, even though they're not necessarily a super up-tempo team, currently about 144th in terms of total possessions per game. So maybe line 5, going to be one to take the points with Toledo, and made a total here of a 157. So 152.5, 154.5. I'm going to be taking the over. 841, 842. Central Florida is on the road against West Virginia. West Virginia does find themselves as a 3.5 point favorite. 140.5 to 141.5 is the total. I'm going to be one to take the points with Central Florida. I did set them as an underdog of 2 points. It's a Central Florida team that's been able to do a solid job on the glass. Now defensively, they're outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but have a West Virginia team that's just 195th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. We'll say with this West Virginia defense, just much better when they're at home rather than away from home. As a matter of fact, they give up more than 16 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. Away from home, they're allowing teams to shoot over 37% from three. That goes down to less than 31% when they are at home. And at home, they're overall a top 20 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You've got Hunter Huff. He huffs, he puffs. He gives you 16 points per game. He shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. And then Brendan Lorient has been really the main man down low, about 11.5 points, 5 boards, pair of assists per contest. Chance Moore has been able to give you more of 10.5 points per game. But it's a team that only shoots 33% from three. And let's say that you get in a pressure spot, 6 67.2% at the free throw line. That is well outside the top 325 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you have a Central Florida team with Themis Folks doing a nice job supplying you with about 14 points per game. He's been a good facilitator with about a 7 assists. He shoots 42% from three-point range. Additionally, you've been able to have Riley Kugel do a nice job supplying this team with about 14.5 points per game. He shoots 39% from three-point range, and I do think that with this bunch, you're going to be able to get a little bit more of Jordan Brooks as well, who's been able to give you 13 points, has come on strong here in conference play. If they need to hit free throws, they shoot 75.5% at the free throw line. Very vulnerable down low outside the top 270 with regards to opponent's two-point shooting percentage, but do think that with this being a slow-down game, West Virginia outside the top 330 in terms of total possessions per game, you do get an under, so I total 140, so like the under and the points here with Central Florida. 843, 844 on the card. It's Ohio playing us to Miami of Ohio. Miami of Ohio, 5.5 point favorites. So in this game, between 159.5 to 160.5, and I'm going to be in on the over. You've got a Miami of Ohio team that's been playing very up-tempo, and a Ohio team that's not been guarding the three-point line. Ohio is right around about 325th in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, letting teams shoot over 36% from the outside. Have a Miami of Ohio team that has been 42nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. With Miami of Ohio, you just have weapons upon weapons out there in the backcourt, as Peter Suter has really been one of your main guys. He shoots nearly 40% from three-point range right now, supplies his team with about 15 points per game. Brent Byers has been able to give you 14 points. He shoots 40% from three-point range. Ian Elmore has been able to be a little bit of a mixer and shaker, 12 points, a little bit of a steal per contest, and I just think it's too much for Ohio to overcome. So I'm going to be willing to lay with Miami of Ohio, as I did set Miami of Ohio as the 8-point favorite. With Ohio, they are going to be looking to push a little bit of tempo here as well. About 93rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But as Miami of Ohio continues to shoot right around about 38% from three-point range, a top 35 team in the country there. Ohio, they are outside the top 340 with their three-point shooting percentage. They've been only about 200th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Top 100 team in terms of their two-point shooting percentage. And you've got Jackson Valesky supplying 17 points, 5 assists. Javon Simmons has been able to give you about 14.5 points, 5.5 boards. Aiden Hadaway is able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game as well. And for this Ohio team, they've been able to do an okay job with their interior defense. Top 200 team with regards to opponent's two-point shooting percentage, but way that they're getting land-based from the outside. I know that Miami of Ohio has had a few non-covers here recently. I think they get back on the cover train here, so I did set my line at 8. I'm going to be willing to lay with Miami of Ohio, and I like this total over. I set my total at a 162. 845, 846, you've got St. John's. They're going to be on the road against Seton, and Seton does find themselves as a home underdog here of 4.5 to 5.5 points. 136.5 to 137.5 is the total, and maybe my total 139. I do like the over. You've got a Seton team that has very much been looking to play slow. They're about 290th in terms of total possessions per game. This St. John's team, the exact opposite. St. John's, top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game. Both teams have very similar strengths. For Seton, they're a top 35 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. St. John's are in the top 40, and for Seton, just overall a little bit of stronger defense, 15th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. St. John's is 19th, but in games played away from home, St. John's actually falls outside the top 75. They give up about 17.5 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and they're giving up a lot of second and third chances in games played away from home outside the top 165 with regards to defensive rebound percentage, and that's the one thing that Seton has been solid with on offense. They do a great job in terms of offensive rebound percentage, ranking in the top 50 with that regard. Now, you do have Zuby Ejiofor for the St. John's team right now, supplying you with about 16 points, 7 boards, 2 blocks per contest, and then Ian Jackson has been relatively solid in the backcourt with about 10 points per game, but when Zuby Ejiofor, along with Dill Mitchell, another forward, 8 points, 7 boards, 3 assists per game, are the main two facilitators for this team. That just leaves you in a little bit of a rough spot. Meanwhile, for Seton, you've got a trio of guys that have been able to give you double figures. I like what Adam Clark is able to bring to the table. He's up a little bit over 12 points per contest. He doesn't really shoot it from 3, but throws in there 5 assists, 2 steals per contest, and then T.J. Simpkins along with A.J. Stan McCray. These two guys combine for about 22.5 points per game. Between the two of them, they're shooting about 36% from three-point range. Both shoot above 78.5% at the free throw line as well. In Seton games, they do involve a lot of fouls. This is a team that ranks in the top 40 nationally in terms of fouls committed and free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. It's a St. John's team that honestly doesn't allow too much, and St. John's does shoot about 73% at the free throw line. I do think that St. John's is going to be able to do just enough to be able to get the job done here. I think that you get the late fouls. I do think that you get those second chances. So this at a total of 139, like the points with Seton and the over 847, 848. UNLV is going to be on the road against San Diego State, and San Diego State does find themselves as a favorite here of 9.5 to 10.5 points. 152.5 to 153.5 is the total. And with San Diego State, I made them favored 12 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Both of these teams actually doing a pretty solid job in terms of generating turnovers. For San Diego State, just overall top 20 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. If you look just strictly at road games right now, when it comes to UNLV, they are a top 30 team, 28th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And it is a pair of teams that have given away the ball a little bit on offense with UNLV. 188th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. San Diego State is 208th. And you've got a San Diego State offense that's about 138th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. UNLV hovering more around about 113th. And for UNLV, they've had one guy, Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, really going to take over mode here in conference play. He's been averaging 20 plus points per contest. Overall for the season, he's shooting in the mid to high 30s from three-point range, in that neighborhood about 42% as a matter of fact. Now, because he had that massive game against Boise State in conference play, he's actually shooting 48% from three-point range. Kamani Hamilton in conference play has been able to shoot about 42% from three-point range, but it is a San Diego State team that I think is overall going to be able to do a relatively solid job in terms of guarding the arc, especially with the way that their perimeter defense is set up for San Diego State in terms of total points allowed on a per possession basis. They do rank 43rd in the country. They've been better at home, though. This ascends into the top 35 when they are at home, and on the flip side, you've got a San Diego State team that you really don't have that one alpha dog scorer, but you do have quite a few guys that are contributing to the cause. Reese, Sticks, and Waters along with Miles Bird combined for 24 points per game. With both of these guys, they shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. Magoon Gwath, at 7 feet tall, actually shoots 47% from three, 8.5 points, 4 boards, block and a half per contest, and then BJ Turn It Up Davis. He's been able to give you about 10 points per contest as well. It's a San Diego State team that has been really good with their interior defense as well. They're a top 40 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, do allow you to shoot about 33% from three-point range. For UNLV, they just have not necessarily been the world's greatest with regards to their opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, allowing teams to shoot about 35.5% from three, outside the top 275 there. And I do think that allows San Diego State to be able to get the job done, and I do think the turnovers help you stay under. So, did set my total 152. I like the under. And with San Diego State, willing to lay up to 11.5 with them. 849, 850 on the card. The Drake and Belmont are going to be doing battle. This is the Missouri Valley Conference Tournament. Right now with Drake, they're an underdog of 11.5 points. So, on this game, it is 158.5 to 159.5. I set a total of a 152. I'm in on the under. You've got a Drake team that has been brutal on defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. 282nd in the country. They looked much better yesterday, but mainly that's because at the Enterprise Center, it just feels like totals go to die there. And this is a Belmont team that all season long has shot it well away from home. 41.6% from three-point range away from home. That is number 2 in all of college basketball. But their defense away from home has also been really good. If you take a look at points allowed on a per possession basis for this Belmont team, they're lying darn near 7.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. If you look at just road games and road games only, it's a Belmont team that's in the top 15 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So they've been able to do a rock solid job there. They're not allowing a lot of second and third chances. They themselves are not really grabbing a lot of second and third chances though as well. And then you do have a Drake team that has been really not great on the defensive glass. You saw yesterday Southern Illinois was able to grab 100 million rebounds. They're about 205th with regards to defensive rebound percentage. I was entering into the day yesterday, and for Drake, you only really have one main scorer on this team as Jalen Quinn, who has come over from Loyola Chicago. He's done a really nice job being able to supply for this team. 19 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, shoots 36.5% from 3. You've got Eli Shellar, who's been able to now shoot about 40% from 3. He's come on strong. They've needed him because Owen Larson has been dealing with injury throughout the season, but Oku Frederico is able to give you 5 rebounds per game. Belmont just has by far the better shooters in this game. Tyler Lundblade has been absolutely tremendous, shooting 90% at the free throw line, about 41% from 3, 16 points per contest. Drew Sanowski is able to give you 6 boards, about 11 points per contest. Sam Mormay, 38% three-point shooter. So I do think that for Belmont, they should have a nice edge here because even if their three-point shooting goes into the abyss a little bit, they're also a top 20 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They're a top 50 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. So I do think that this total holds under. So my total 152, like the under. And for Belmont, I'm willing to lay up to 11.5 with them. 851, 852. It is Illinois, Chicago, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Murray State. Well, Enterprise Center, so both teams are on the road as Murray State is a favorite of 1 to 1.5 points. Total on this game, it is between 148 to a 149.5, and with Murray State, I'm going to be willing to lay it. I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite. Now with Murray State, it is a team that's going to be very much looking to push tempo, and Illinois Chicago is more of a mid-tempo team, with Illinois Chicago about 219th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Murray State is 46th, and with this Murray State team, they've been up and down with regards to their defense. 235th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They actually dare you to just drive the ball in and take twos, though. They're a top 5 team in the country in terms of percentage of opponents' field goal attempts that do come from inside the 3-point line, and they've been able to get some good production out of Frederick King. Gives you about 13 points, 8 boards, pair of blocks per contest. Murray State overall about 147th in the country with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Illinois Chicago has been right around about 134th, so that helps out both of these teams. And Illinois Chicago is not necessarily a great 3-point shooting team. They only shoot about 31% from the outside, and they've been a top 50 team with regards to just their overall percentage of shots that come from inside the 3-point line. And in Illinois Chicago games, there's going to be lots of second and third chances. In games played away from home, Illinois Chicago, top 20 team in terms of percentage of the missed shots to become an offensive rebound. They're also 298th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're allowing a bunch of second and third chances. Teams are grabbing over 31% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Murray State more around about 189th, and that's a big reason why. In this spot, I actually do like the over. I set my total at a 151.5. You've got an Illinois Chicago team that still has been very lackadaisical with regards to their backcourt play. They've been turning the ball over a little bit more than what you'd like. They're outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. You have Elijah Crawford, who's able to give you 13 points, 4.5 assists. Andy Johnson, Ahmad Henderson, they combine for about 24 points per game, and Johnson has been able to shoot 37% from 3-point range. Meanwhile, with this Murray State group, you've been able to get really good production in the backcourt out of Javon Jackson, who gives you 36% 3-point shooting, 16 points per contest, and then Roman Doman, 38.5% 3-point shooter, 14 points per game. So with Murray State, did set them as the favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce with them, and I do like this total over. I did set my total at a 151.5, 853, 854 on the card. It is Valparaiso, and they're going to be playing against Bradley, obviously from the Enterprise Center. Right now, that initial opener is Bradley being a 2.5-point favorite. Total I'm seeing is a 141.5, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Bradley in this spot, as I did set them as a 5.5-point favorite. And with this Valparaiso team, they just don't do a great job with regards to their interior offense. Really, neither of these teams do. That's a big reason why I did set my total here at a 135.5. I'm going to be in on the under. Have a Valparaiso team that has been relatively solid in terms of their defensive rebounding in games played away from home. Teams are only pulling in about 25.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is a top 50 mark in the country. Bradley, they're not necessarily so great with this regard. Bradley is currently about 140th with regards to defensive rebound percentage, but in games played away from home, teams pull in about 29% of their misses as an offensive rebound. But Bradley has been a really good team in terms of generating turnovers. This team is in the top 45 with regards to turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Jaquan Johnson has really been the main man. 17 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists, 2.5 steals, shoots 40% for 3. Alex Huberse, he shoots 43% from 3, and it's a Bradley team that's been able to shoot 35.5% from 3. Again, that rough 2-point shooting percentage, that is going to be a little bit costly to them, but they do have the fact that they're able to generate turnovers at their side. And for this Valparaiso group, they've been good in terms of guarding the 3-point line. Teams are shooting only about 32.5% for 3 against them. Top 115 mark in the country. They are just outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And O&Ds, he gives you all Ds of these 13 points per game, shooting 42% from 3. You've got JT Pettigrew, 6.5 boards, 12 points per game. Sean Tupula has been able to give you 6 boards as well. So, I mean, these guys have been able to do a nice job on that front. But that said, with Bradley, I do think that the way that they generate turnovers, and not only the way that neither of these teams knock down their interior shots, I do think that Bradley is going to be able to get the job done here. I did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And with this total, I set mine at a 135.5, so I'm going to be in on this total under as well. 855, 856 on the card. You've got Illinois State, and they're going to be taking on Northern Iowa. No numbers up on this game, as this was the late game that we're seeing on Thursday with Northern Iowa being able to survive in advance. But I've got my numbers. I set Illinois State as a 3-point favorite, so want to lay up to 2.5 with them. 3.5 or more, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Northern Iowa. And with this total, I made mine a 125, so 124.5 or less in on the over, 125.5 or higher. The under, you've got a Northern Iowa team that is one of the slowest teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. Out of 365 Division I teams entering into the day on Thursday, about 361st in terms of total possessions per game. Illinois State much slower than they've been in the past, 245th in terms of total possessions per game, and it's an Illinois State team that's really stepped up to the plate with regards to their defense. 49th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. We'll say they are giving up 23 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and Northern Iowa, their defense has traveled numero uno entering into yesterday in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They give up quite a bit in the first half in that game against Evansville, but still has been a unit that has been able to do a good job in terms of guarding the arc. Top 10 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage doesn't mean quite as much in this game, and it is an Illinois State team that has been really good in terms of not allowing second and third chances. A top 40 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Northern Iowa does not pull in any sort of second and third chances for themselves, but they don't let you get second and third chances. And then you got Trey Campbell along with Leon Bond, who combine for about 25 points per game. Will Hornseth has done a nice job being Mr. Versatile for the team. 11.5 points, 4.5 boards, pair of assists, gives you just under a block per contest. just in the very small amount of threes. Seton shoots over 40% from three, but guys like Ben Schwieger and company have done a nice job in terms of stepping up for the team. Meanwhile, it's Chase Walker on the flip side for Illinois State. He's been able to give you about 6 boards. He throws in there about 13.5 points per game. Johnny Kinzinger, Bowden Scumberg, Tyree Coleman are your backcourt pieces that all give you 10.3 and 11.5 points per contest. With Kinzinger, he only shoots 31% from three, way down from a season ago, but Scumberg and Coleman have both been able to shoot above 42% from three-point. Just an Illinois State team that doesn't really generate a lot of turnovers, and they've been outside the top 150 in terms of their own ball security, but do a nice job being able to defend down low, and they don't allow you a lot of cheap trips to the free throw line as well. They themselves are outside the top 3 in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis, and for Northern Iowa, they're just not shooting it well at the free throw line themselves. Entering into the day on Thursday, they were shooting just 69.8% at the free throw line. That is outside the top 260 in all of college basketball, bottom 5 team in terms of free throw attempts per game as well. So I think that you get a slug of a game here. 124.5 for less in on the over, 125.5 for higher the under. Illinois State, I'm willing to lay up to 2.5 with them, 3.5 for more. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Northern Iowa. 8:57, 8:58, Northeastern is going to be on the road against North Carolina A&T, and A&T does find themselves as a home underdog here of 1 point in some spots. Other spots are a 1 point favorite. Total between 153.5 to 154.5, and I did set Northeastern as the 2.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay with North Carolina A&T. With A&T, it's a unit that has just really been able to do a nice job on the glass. They're a top 100 team with regards to overall rebound percentage, and for Northeastern, they have been so ghastly on defense. They're outside the top 315 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They don't do the little things well, as they're outside the top 200 in terms of ball security, shoot just 68.8% at the free throw line, outside the top 250 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. You do have William Kamori, who's been able to give you 13.5 points, shoots 40% from three. Yori Fritz has been a little bit banged up, but he's back 10.5 points, right around about 5.5 rebounds per game. But losing Xander O'Leary, your top rebounder, really hurt this team, especially in a spot where you know that North Carolina A&T is going to be looking to pile drive the ball down low. They're outside the top 280 in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, but they've got the best scorer out there on the floor. That'd be Lewis Walker, 19 points, 5 boards. He shoots about 37% from three, and then off the bench, you've been able to get a little bit more of something out of Bryson Ogletree. Shoots 36.5% from three, but he only contributes like 4.5 points per game. You've got a pair of teams that are neither here nor there with regards to their tempo. A&T is about 151st in the country in terms of total possessions, bringing Northeastern 133rd, but with Northeastern just not guarding a soul and giving up a lot of second and third chances, I do think that this North Carolina A&T team going to be able to have some success there. Where they really get beat is from three-point. A&T is outside the top 300 with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, along with their own three-point shooting just being a little bit awful. But Trent Middleton, Zamku, Welche, Ume are combining for about 23.5 points per game. I think that that's enough to be able to get the job done. So with A&T, I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay the number, and I set my total at a 156.5. So on this total, because Northeastern has been so bad with their defense, I do like the over as well. 8:59, 8:60, we go to the SoCon tournament neutral court game between Chattanooga and the Citadel. Citadel does find themselves as a sizable underdog here of 6.5 to 7.5 points. 145.5 is the total, and I do like the under. I did set my total at a 144. Chattanooga not really pushing a ton of tempo this year, about 262nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. The Citadel's outside the top 300, and both of these teams have been bad with their defense. We're going to call it what it is. Chattanooga just here outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For the Citadel, 349th. And for the Citadel, they're allowing teams to shoot over 35.5% from three-point, and that's significant because both of these teams go bombs away from three. Citadel is about 25th in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point. Meanwhile, for this Chattanooga bunch, they're more around about 17th, and for the Citadel, they only shoot about 32.5% for three. They're outside the top 275 with their three-point shooting percentage. You do have Braxton Williams, Christian Moore, who have been able to combine for about 25.5 points per game, and then you do have Solo Abasi down low, who's been able to supply about 6 rebounds per game, but other than that, you really don't have anything on the post either, as the Citadel also outside the top 250 in terms of rebound percentage, and for as bad as this Chattanooga team is in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're really not giving up a ton of looks from three. They're allowing teams to shoot about 33% from three. That over is around country average. Jordan Frinston has been your main scorer, 16 points to go along with about 4 assists per game, and he shoots 45% from three. Brandon Watkins shoots 45.5% from three. Billy the Kid Smith has been a little bit of a disappointment from three, but still gives you about 8.5 points per game. Now you've got nobody on the roster other than Tate Gardner that's currently healthy. That gives you over 3.5 rebounds per game. But again, the Citadel's just so bad down low that I don't think it's going to matter too much in this game. It's a Citadel team that is probably not going to be able to execute too well on the inside, as Chattanooga also a top 250 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Citadel well outside the top 250 with their own 2-point shooting percentage. Just don't think that the Citadel does their part with the total, so I might go 144. I like the under, and with Chattanooga, going to be willing to lay it, set them as a 10-point favorite. 861, 862. VMI is going to be playing against the UNC Greensboro, and Greensboro is a 7.5-point favorite. So on this game is 155.5, and with Greensboro, I did set them as a favorite of 9.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay it. Just have a VMI team that has been rough, to say the least. In terms of total possessions per game, they're really not pushing a ton of tempo, 244th in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, Greensboro, in comparison to past years, they're pushing tempo, 153rd in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, boy, have they been ghastly on defense. 352nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and that's not even the worst defense in this game. For VMI, they are 361st. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they just never got Ricky Bradley out there on the floor to help out the backcourt, and they've been really relying upon Tanzi Izaglu to be able to give you some backcourt support, and he's been able to give the team about 4 assists per game. TJ Johnson has been that do-it-all guy, 18 points, 7 boards. He shoots about 35.5% from three-point range, but that said, it is a team that is just giving up a ton on the inside. In terms of rebound percentage, they're in the bottom 50 in all of college basketball, outside the top 300 with their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and for Greensboro, they should be able to absolutely feast down low with having Justin Neely giving you a double-double, 17.5 points, 11.5 boards, and he gives you 2.5 assists per game as well. It's a team that has been able to rise up with their 3-point shooting. Lillian Marvel has been the main reason why he shoots 52.5% from 3-point range. It's a VMI team that in games played away from them, they shoot just 30.1% from 3. That's an issue considering they're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from 3. Greensboro, overall 58th in the country. They shoot 36.1% from the outside. I think as a result, Greensboro going to be able to roll in this game, and I do think that this total goes under just because of VMI's bad 3-point shooting away from home. So did set a total of 151.5. I like the under, and with Greensboro, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 with them. 863, 864, Sacred Heart, they're going to be on the road facing off against Merrimack. Well, in a neutral court, it's at Boardwalk Hall for the Metro Atlantic Tournament. Currently no numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I did set Sacred Heart as a underdog of 9 points. I'm willing to lay up to 8.5 with Merrimack, 9.5 or more. Going to be willing to take the points with Sacred Heart. Made a total to where a 141.5 or less. I'm in on the over 142.5 or higher, the under sub by total 142. Merrimack is just playing so slow that it's not even funny. In terms of total possessions per game, the Merrymen are 356th in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, Merrimack overall very nice defense, 89th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Top 25 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and that's big because you've got a Sacred Heart team that takes over 50% of their field goal attempts from 3-point, and they've been a solid 3-point shooting team at 36%. That falls to about 35% away from home, but Anquan Hill has been able to give you 15 plus points per contest, throws in there about 5.5 boards per contest. You've been able to get a lot out of Jan Farrell, who's been able to give you 12 points, just under 40% 3-point shooting. And then Deshaun Gittins, he's getting it with 14 points, 6 boards. He shoots 42% from 3-point range. Makai Connor has been that main facilitator with about 6 assists per contest. But that said, you've got on the flip side a Merrimack team that even though you don't necessarily have as much outside shooting, and this has been a team that away from home has been outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they are doing the little things well. They're a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, while on defense, top 55 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Sacred Heart is about 250th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. If you need Merrimack to cover at the free throw line, they do shoot 79% on the free throw line. KVR Kennedy, 18.5 points, 4 assists, only shoots in the mid-30s from 3, but Ernest Shelton, he's been able to give you 16 points. He shoots 35% from 3-point range. Todd Brogna has been able to give you about 5 boards. That's where Merrimack gets destroyed. They are well outside the top 320 in terms of their overall rebound percentage, but you've got Casey Ugakazi down low, who's been able to give you a pair of blocks. As Merrimack is also a top 25 team in terms of shot block percentage as well. So do think the Merrimack should be a nice sizable favorite here. I'm willing to lay up to 8.5 with Merrimack, 9.5 or more, taking the points with Sacred Heart, and then 141.5 or less, and on the over 142.5 or higher, the under. 865, 866. St. Peter's is going to be playing against Fairfield, and this is another game without numbers, but I've got my handicap as St. Peter's. I did set here as a favorite of 5 points. I'm willing to lay up to 4.5 with them, 5.5 or more, take the points with Fairfield, and then a 134.5 or less, and on the over 135.5 or higher, the under. You have a St. Peter's team that's looking to play incredibly slowly in terms of total possessions per game. They are 317th in all of college basketball. Fairfield has slowed themselves down quite a bit as well, 251st in terms of total possessions per game. Neither here nor there with the Fairfield defense, 166th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, St. Peter's is a top 120 team because they do a great job in terms of generating turnovers. The St. Peter's team, in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, is a top 25 group in the country. St. Peter's can't shoot to save their lives. They're outside the top 350 with both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages away from home, with that 2-point shooting percentage falling outside the top 330, but They also, in games played away from home, are a top 5 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Brett Bland, Bryce Eaton, these two guys combined for about 25 points per game. And with Eaton, he's been able to give you about 4 assists per contest. CJ Robinson has been able to give you about 3 assists per game as well. Eric Morgan Jr. has actually been your top 3-point shooter, but he only gives you about 4 points per game. But for St. Peter's, they've been a team that has played games with a lot of fouls. They're a top 20 team in terms of fouls given on a per possession basis, and they do shoot about 74% in the free throw line. So when they could get to the free throw line, they're pretty solid there. And then for Fairfield, they just do the little things well in terms of offensive rebound percentage away from home. They're another top 30 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Top 80 unit. You've got Braden Sparks, who gives you 17.5 points, shoots 40% from 3. Brandon Benjamin, Declan Wolfinger. These guys combined for 26 points, a little bit over 18 rebounds per game. You've had Cam Estevez deal with an injury, so that means that Tony Williams has had to step up. He's given the team 6 points, shoots in the low 30s from 3-point range. And for Fairfield, they shoot about 71.5% the free throw line. I do think that even though they've taken great care of the ball, that St. Peter's is going to be able to generate a few turnovers, and it's just a Fairfield team that's not executing on the inside, outside the top 290 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage. So 134.5 for less, and on the over, 135.5 for higher, the under. And with this spot, I did set my line at a 5, so 4.5 for less. I am going to be willing to lay it with St. Peter's, and in a case of 5.5 plus, going to be willing to take those points with Fairfield. 867, 868, you've got Texas State. They're going to be playing those to Southern Miss. Well, and Pensacola, Florida for the Sun Belt tournament with Southern Miss. They're currently the opening 1.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 142.5, and I think that the wrong team is favored. I said Texas State as a 3-point favorite. I like them on the money line. Southern Miss just has not been able to shoot from 3. They're about 350th in the country with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. Now, Texas State has all sorts of turnover issues in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on the offensive side of things. They are 303rd in all of college basketball. Away from home, that goes inside the top 250, though. And for Southern Miss, they themselves are having a tough time being able to take care of the ball. 321st in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and Texas State is a better team in terms of generating the turnovers. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis generated on defense, top 70 mark in the country. DJ Hall, Mark Drone combined for 29.5 points per game. You've been able to have Dimp Purnell be a guy that's been able to bomb it from 3. They lost him, though. They're probably not going to have him available in this tournament, but Caden Gums as a main facilitator, about 2 steals, 3 assists, about 9 points per contest. Do like what he's able to bring to the table. And if you find yourself in a pressure spot, Texas State, they do shoot about 75.5% at the free throw line. Meanwhile, for Southern Miss, they were dealing with the injury to Isaac Tavares. He's been able to come back, and he's been able to give the team 14 plus points per contest, so that's been a relief for them. Additionally, you've got Tyleik Weeks, who's been the main scorer with about 18.5 points per game, but Weeks and Tavares shoot a combined 17% from 3-point range, and then Dejai Benoit down low has been rock solid, 8 boards, 11.5 points per game. It's a Southern Miss team that is very reliant upon second and third chances in games played away from home. They have been a top 120 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, for Texas State, they've been even better. They're 76th in the country, and I do think that that allows the Texas State team to be able to get the job done, even though you do have a Southern Miss team that has been a top 90 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Texas State top 5 team with regards to percentage of their field goal attempts that come from 3. So I did set my total here at a 137. I'm going to be in on the under, and with Texas State, I made them the favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them outright on the money line. This is a game without numbers. This is 869, 870. South Alabama, they're going to be playing against Georgia Southern. This is out there at Pensacola, Florida. I've got my handicap. I made Georgia Southern the 2.5 point underdog. 3 plus. Going to be willing to take a shot here on Georgia Southern at 2 or less. I'm willing to lay with South Alabama and made a total of a 150.5. 150 or less. I like the over. 151 or higher. The under. You've got a Georgia Southern group that has been really playing at warp speed this year. A top 25 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Georgia Southern doing a pretty solid job in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Top 65 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Georgia Southern is really not a great 3-point shooting team at 32.7%. And for South Alabama, number 1 in the country in terms of percentage of opponents' field goal attempts that come from 3, and they force over 65% of opponents' field goal attempts to come from 3-point range. Now, you do have Spud Webb, Align Tyron Moore, who have been able to give you more for this Georgia Southern team. It combined about 30.8 points per game. Moore has been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3-point range. Ja'Kavion White has been able to give you about 9.5 points, 3 rebounds per game. So these guys have been able to do a pretty rock solid job there. And then on the flip side of things, you do have a South Alabama team that has just been able to be a really well-connected group as they do a great job in terms of taking care of the ball. This is a top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They also don't put you on the free throw line. Top 10 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. Now, if they need to close out a game, it's a bunch that shoots 66.2% at the free throw line. That is a bottom 20 mark in all of college basketball. You do have the Chaz Harris, who's been able to give you 19 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists per game, and then Adam Olson, he shoots 39% from 3, 16.5 points per contest. You've been able to get Jane Cooper going. He gives you about 11.5 points per game. They dealt with the injury, Peyton Law, for the beginning part of the season. He's out once again, so you've got Randy Brady, who's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. It is a bunch that gives up a lot of second and third chances, but so does Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern and South Alabama, both well outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but with the way that South Alabama does a nice job in terms of forcing things to the outside, I think that helps them out big time here, but I do think that Georgia Southern going to be able to speed up this game. South Alabama outside the top 240 in terms of total possessions per game, so 150 or less likely over, 151 or higher the under. I'm willing to lay up to 2 here with South Alabama, 3 or more, taking those points with Georgia Southern. 871, 872, it is South Dakota, and they're going to be playing against Omaha. This is out there for the Summit League tournament, and right now with Omaha, you're going to be finding them as a favorite of 2.5 points, so on this game, 115.5 to 151.5, and I'm laying up with Omaha. I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. It's an Omaha group that has been neither here nor there with their tempo 167th in terms of total possessions per game. South Dakota just continues to gun it. They are currently 26th in the country in terms of total possessions per game and really not playing well on defense. They're in 89th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Omaha, they're right there with them at about 295th, but the Bruns burner, Isaac Bruns, has been dealing with injury over the last 10 games for the South Dakota team, so they've been very short-handed there. They're going to try to give him a go here, but who knows if he's going to be able to give them much of anything whatsoever, or even if he makes it out there for this game, as Cameron Fens, the true 7-footer, has had to take ownership of this team. 14.5 points, 8.5 boards, block and a half per contest, and then you do have Jordan Crawford, who gives you 14.5 points, shoots 37% per 3, but with Isaiah Butin, he's had to become really the head of the snake, and he's the main facilitator with about 12 points, 3.5 assists per game, and with Omaha, they do have their main guy back, as they were dealing with an injury to begin the season to Paul DeBourget. He was a transfer that came in from Miami, and he's been able to do a nice job. Give you about 43% three-point shooting, 18.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Lone guy on the roster that gives you over 4.7 rebounds per game, but Lance Waddles, Tony Osborne, these two guys, they combine for about 25 points per game. You've been able to have Deshaun Glover be able to step up, give you 11 points. Omaha overall shoots about 36% per 3. That's a top 75 mark in all of college basketball. Not going to give you any sort of second and third chances. This team is well outside the top 300 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and they are getting blasted down low. They're outside the top 300 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. That's how they've been able to do a good job in terms of guarding the perimeter, and for the South Dakota group, they are in the same boat. They are outside the top 320 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They very much rely upon getting to the free throw line, top 10 team in terms of free throws per game, and for Omaha, they've actually been a top 150 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. Do think as a result, Omaha gets the job done in an up-tempo game. Semi-total 154.5. I'm willing to lay with Omaha, and I do like the over semi-total at a 154.5, 873, 874. Denver is going to be playing against North Dakota. North Dakota does find themselves as a underdog of 3.5 to 4.5 points. So on this game is 160.5, and with Denver, I can only make them a 2-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take some points. North Dakota has done one thing well. They're a top 35 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. With North Dakota, I guess they've done 1.5 things well. They're not necessarily the world's worst team in terms of being able to knock down their threes as well, but they're getting blasted down low, 287th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Denver is about 270th, so both of these teams allow a lot of second and third chances, and Denver's been ghastly on defense. 360th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and North Dakota right there with them. They're about 327th. Now for Denver, they have been a top 80 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in games played away from home. They're shooting well above 36% per 3, overall 38.5% from the outside, with Carson Johnson supplying 20 points, shoots 41% per 3. Zane Nelson gets zany with shooting 43% per 3, 13.5 points per contest. Julius Rollins has been able to be a nice little bit of a glue guy. Gives you about a 3 boards, 8 points, comes in off the bench, gives you a little bit of production there. And then for North Dakota, you've been able to have Eli King be able to be sort of that versatile, do-it-all sort of guy for them. 11.5 points, 5.5 boards, pair of assists, generates 2.2 steals per game. Doesn't really pop it from three-point range, though. Grayson Ullman, he shoots 31% per 3, 15.5 points per game. North Dakota, they've been allowing teams really to gash them on the inside. As a matter of fact, they're outside the top 340 with regards to both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They give up a lot of free throws as well. Top 45 team in terms of fouls committed on a per possession basis, but They have been solid in terms of taking care of the ball. This is a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And to the credit of this North Dakota team, they have been a top 225 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage as well. I do think that that's going to keep them lively in an up-tempo game where you just don't have a lot of defense being played here. I think that there's going to be great offensive execution. Did semi-total 164. I think that you're close enough for late bells, so in on the over. And I'm going to be in on anything above 2 points here with North Dakota. 875, 876. UT Martin is going to be playing against Tennessee State. This is for the OVC semifinal. No numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap as I made UT Martin the underdog here of 4.5 points. I'm willing to lay up to 4 with Tennessee State 5 or more. Take the points with UT Martin, then made a total of a 138.5. So 138 or less. I like the over. 139 or higher, I'm in on the under. As for UT Martin, they've been able to do an incredible job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. They're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and overall just a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are taking absolutely no care of the ball whatsoever, though. They are outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and have a Tennessee State team that has been able to do a relatively solid job on defense. Currently, they are checking in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, right in that neighborhood of about 92nd in the country, because they have actually been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of generating turnovers. And to the credit of UT Martin, they've been able to do a nice job on this front as well, as right now with Tennessee State, they rank 23rd in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and UT Martin is more around about 28th. And for UT Martin, just dealt with injuries all throughout the entirety of the season. Now they're about as healthy as they're going to be. Filip Rakocevic, 9.5 points, 4.5 boards. Doesn't really pop it from three, but then you've got Andre Brumovic, who's been able to give you 14 points. He shoots 36.5% from three-point range. Efren Trinka has been able to give you about 6.5 points. He only shoots about 30% from three, but nice mixers and shakers out there. It's a UT Martin team that's been shooting about 30.5% from three, well outside the top three are there. And then on the flip side of things, you got a Tennessee State team that has been able to do a very good job in clutch spots with their free throw shooting at 76%. That's a top 50 mark in the country. They'll put you on the free throw line plenty, and UT Martin's outside the top three with their free throw shooting percentage, so that's a big factor in this game. Tennessee State only shooting about 31.5% from three-point range themselves, but have perhaps the most versatile player in this game, Aaron Namakura, 18 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists, 3 steals per game, and then Travis Harper has been able to shoot 39% from three. Jalen Petrie has been great down low, 6.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and with the Tennessee State team being one that has been able to do a nice job on the glass, top 100 team with regards to overall rebound percentage. UT Martin, again, they're going to be able to pull in there some second and third chances, but in the end, I do think that Tennessee State should be the favorite here. I'm willing to lay up to 4 with them. 5 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with UT Martin, and then I set a total to where 138 or less in on the over, 139 or higher the under. This is another game without numbers because for Southeast Missouri State, they had to survive advance to get this game. 877, 878, Southeastern Missouri State is going to be facing off against Morehead St, and I set Southeast Missouri State as 4-point favorite, so willing to lay up to 3.5 with them, 4.5 or more, take the points with Morehead St, and then set a total to where 141.5 or less. I like the over, 142.5 or higher the under. You've got a Southeast Missouri State team that's been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, this is a top 100 team in all of college basketball, and you've got sort of dueling styles here. Morehead State has been one of the best teams in all of college basketball in terms of giving themselves second and third chances on the offensive glass. For Morehead State, in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they are 19th in all of college basketball. So these Missouri State grabs no second and third chances whatsoever, but in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, this team is in the top 100 in all of college basketball. Morehead State, they give up a lot of second and third chances. They're in 40th in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. Morehead State has been slowing down more and more as the season has went along, 258th in the country in terms of total possessions. Brain should have some tired legs here for Southeast Missouri State here as well, but for Southeast Missouri State, do think that they're going to be able to get quite a bit out of Luke Almendover, who's been able to give you 14 points. Just a really good athlete in general. Shoots 32% from three-point range. Braxton Secker, Brendan Terry, both of these guys give you about 11.5 points per game. BJ Ward has done a nice job, give you about 11.5 points per game. And for Southeast Missouri State, outside of Terry, along with Marquise Bell, who gives you 5.1 rebounds per game, one two guys that really give you over 4 rebounds per game, so not a ton of size on this roster. Meanwhile, for Morehead State, your main big man has been Amnur Malak, who's come over from West Georgia. He's been able to do a nice job breathing some life into this team, as he's been able to give you 7.5 points, a block, 4.5 rebounds per game. John Carroll is caroling all the way to give you about 7.5 boards, 11.5 points per game. He's the only guy on the roster that gives you over 4.4 rebounds per game. You do have George Marshall, Davion Cunningham, who've done a nice job combining for about 25.5 points per game, but I do think that in the end, Morehead State is just not going to be able to get the job done here because they have been a team that gives up a lot of second and third chances. They're also outside the top 235 in terms of their ball security, turnovers on a per possession basis, and with this Southeast Missouri State team. They are a top 100 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. They've also been nice on the inside, top 85 team with regards to opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. So 141.5 or less in on the over, 142.5 or higher the under, 1 to 3.5 here with Southeast Missouri State, 4.5 or more. Take the points with Morehead St, 879, 880. Portland and Washington State do battle from lovely Las Vegas. No numbers up on this game, but I got my handicap. So Washington State is a favorite of 7 points. I'm willing to lay up to 6.5 with them. 7.5 or more, take the points with Portland, and then 148.5 or less. And on the over, 149.5 or higher. The under, you've got a Portland team then has just been really sloppy with the ball, but frankly, that's also the kryptonite here for Washington State. Both of these teams outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Now you got one team that is very clearly better from 3-point range. Washington State has become a top 75 team with their 3-point shooting percentage. Portland has honestly been a top 85 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. Not getting a lot going from the outside though, as Portland right now, their 3-point shooting percentage is right around about 342nd. They shoot 29.9% from 3. Going into yesterday, they were shooting 28.3% in a roadside shoot court environment, and our main guy right now is Joel Foxwell. He's been able to do it all. 15.5 points, 6.5 assists. Does shoot about 32% from 3, which for their standards is good. Makai Balu has been able to shoot about 34% from 3. Supplies the team with 9 points per game. It is a Portland team that has honestly been a top 150 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're getting blowtorch from 3 though. They're allowing teams to shoot 36.9% from 3-point range. That is outside the top 340 in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, it's a Washington State team that they themselves, not necessarily the world's greatest perimeter defense. Right now, they're allowing teams to shoot 35.5% from 3 outside the top 260 in all of college basketball. They've been okay with their interior offense, top 100 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage outside the top 235 with opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. It's a Washington State team that if they need to bury free throws to cover a spread, they do shoot 74.1% the free throw line and break glass in case of emergency for ace glass. 16 points, shoots 36% from 3. Riyard Varvers shoots 42% from 3. Emilio Yeho has good versatility, 5.5 boards, 10 points, shoots 40% from 3. So do think that Washington State should be a bit of a favorite here. You should be getting a relatively mid-tempo game for Portland in terms of total possessions frame, 104th in the country. Washington State, they've been neither here nor there at about 188, so 148.5 or less than on the over, 149.5 or higher the under, 1 to lay up to 6.5 here with Washington State, 7.5 or more. Take the points with Portland. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games, 881, 882. Seattle will be facing the winner of Loyola Marymount and San Diego. I do have to do this a little bit in advance. We do need to have this uploaded by midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern, and this game went very, very late, but that said, if you do get Loyola Marymount, I'd be setting Marymount as a 5.5 point underdog. If you do get San Diego, I'd be setting that line more around about 9.5 to 10. And then with Marymount versus Seattle, 134 less than on the over, 135 or higher the under. And then if it's San Diego, more on the neighborhood about a 140 or less to the over, 141 or higher the under, as San Diego is a little bit more of a high octane team. They've been able to do a little bit of better job of shooting from 3. And as I'm doing this, they're actually the team that's leading right now, and they are dealing with Tyler Johnson being out of the fold, but you've got Trenari Lane who's been able to step up. They've been able to get a lot out of Adrian McIntyre, who's only been able to average about 10 points per contest, had double figures in the first half of their game on Thursday, so that's very interesting. Not a guy that really pops it from 3, and Seattle should be able to win the battle down low against either of these teams. Loyola Marymount has been outside the top 275 with regards to offensive rebound percentage. For San Diego, they're overall 344th in terms of overall rebound percentage. I'm not saying that Seattle's an amazing rebounding team. They themselves are outside the top 235 with that regard, but you do have a guy in Will Hembright who gives you 2.5 blocks, 5 boards, 12 points per contest. It's a Seattle team that their biggest kryptonite is their 3-point shooting. They only shoot about 33% from 3. Overall, Seattle is outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. So good at generating turnovers. So top 20 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Top 60 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Teams only shoot 32% from 3 against them. They've been a top 65 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Main scorer has been Brady Maldonado, 15 points, shoots 70% the free throw line, 38% from 3 points. John Succhio has versatility with about 11 points, 4 boards. They will pop a few threes, but he only shoots about 28.5% from 3. And then off the bench, Sean Chrysophilis, 6.5 points, 38% 3-point shooter. So with this Seattle team, I do think that they should be a favorite against either of these teams. With Loyola Marymount, they're going to have better backcourt play with the likes of Jan Vide, MJ Amy and company. Hot Rodney Brown has been able to shoot about 38% from 3-point range. Loyola Marymount, the slower tempo team, the two as Loyola Marymount in terms of total possessions per game, they check in right around about 176th in all of college basketball. San Diego has been pushing a little bit of tempo, even without Steve Lavin at about 127th, and Seattle, either way, they're going to be looking to just play good defense. They've been a mid-tempo team, 163rd in terms of total possessions per game. So if it is Loyola Marymount, 5 or less willing to lay with Seattle, 6 or more to get the points with Marymount, and then 134 or less in on the over, 135 or higher the under, and if Seattle faces off against San Diego, more like 140 or less the over, 141 or higher the under, and with Seattle would be setting them more around about a 9.5 to a 10-point favorite, so we'd be willing to lay 9 with them. Anything good double figures will be that buy point on San Diego. And now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-603, 306-604. You've got Bellarmine, and they're going to be playing against Central Arkansas. This is out there from the great state of Florida. And right now for Bellarmine, they find themselves as an underdog of 5.5 to 6.5 points. So on this game, it is 155.5. And with Bellarmine, I did set them as the underdog of 7.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay it. Bellarmine out of 365 Division I teams are 365th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, excelling on offense, they're a top 40 team in terms of points per possession and top 30 team with their 3-point shooting percentage, top 10 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, but now have to face off against a Central Arkansas team that's really been able to generate turnovers. Top 60 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now, where the Central Arkansas team can be at is on the inside. They're outside the top 300 with regards to opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, but still, you've got a guy in Cameron Hunter who's been able to supply 19 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists. He shoots from 3-point range right around about 35%. Ty Robinson shoots 36.5% from 3, 14 points per contest. You've been able to have Cole McCormick be a versatile piece at right around about 6'8", 9.5 points, shoots a hair above 30% from 3-point range. And for Bellarmine, it's all about Jack Kaczynski and what he's been able to bring to the table. As for Jack Kaczynski, he's up to about 21.5 points, 5 boards. He's been able to shoot about 40% from 3. As a matter of fact, your top 3 scorers, he, Brian Waddell, Keenan Gooding, they all shoot at least 41.5% from the outside. Waddell and Gooding combined for about 27 points per contest, but you don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. They have been a bottom 10 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. Good for them that they're a top 10 team with regards to their free throw shooting percentage, but I do think that Central Arkansas going to do a nice job generating turnovers. Central Arkansas, top 30 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, and you have dueling tempo. Central Arkansas, they're about 115th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Bellarmine 313th, but I think that Central Arkansas executes well enough on offense for the over, so by total 157.5, so I like the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it here with Central Arkansas, 306-605, 306-606. Florida Gulf Coast is going to be playing against Lipscomb. Lipscomb, 3.5 to 4.5 point favorites, so on this game it is 150.5, and for Lipscomb, I did set them as a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Florida Gulf Coast. They've been playing quite up tempo this year in terms of total possessions per game, checking in about 93rd in all of college basketball. Lipscomb has been right there, 94, so both of these teams play at the exact same tempo. For Lipscomb, not a great defense, but a respectable 198th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, Florida Gulf Coast, well outside the top 250. Florida Gulf Coast has been outside the top 250 with their 3-point shooting percentage defense. That's big against a Lipscomb team that shoots 36% from the outside. That is a top 75 mark in the country. And for Lipscomb, just really good versatility. As Grant Asman stands right around about 6'10", he's flying the team with 14.5 points, 6 boards, and from 3-point range, he shoots about 36.5% from 3-point range. You've been able to have Ross Caladino be able to shoot 42% from 3-point range. Someone in 6'10", Charlie Williams shoots 34% from 3, and Mateo Esmeraldo is up to about 7 assists per game. Flip side, you got a Florida Gulf Coast team that has J.R. Kaczynski. He comes over from Notre Dame, and he's been your top scorer with about 16 points, 6 boards, so he's a little bit of a do-it-all guy. And then Isaiah Malone has been able to throw in there about 10.5 points, 2 blocks per contest, 5.5 rebounds. Jordan Ellerby, he's eating good in the neighborhood, giving you about 13.5 points, shoots 36% from 3-point range. But for this Florida Gulf Coast team, the way that they just allow a lot of shots from 3, they've been outside the top 275 with that 3-point shooting percentage. Granted, they've been relatively solid on the glass. I do think that Lipscomb finds a way to persevere, get the job done. With Lipscomb, I'm willing to lay it with them. I set them as a 6-point favorite, and then I did make my total a 152. I do think that you get just enough late fouls for the over, so like the over. 306-607, 306-608. You've got Austin Peay, and they're going to be playing against Stetson. The Hatters are a 10.5 to a 11.5 point underdog, seeing some 9.5s out there as well, so between 9.5 and 11.5. Totals between 148.5 to 152.5, so this is a number that's truly all over the place. Set my total 148.5, so 149 plus is my buy point on the under. You've had an awesome Peay team that's been able to do a really good job in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 50 team in games played away from them in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Solid 3-point shooting team as well. They shoot from 3-point range 35.9% overall for the season, top 75 mark in the country. Now Stetson is now shooting 36.2% from 3, but big home and road split, 41.4% at home, 32.6% away from home, and Stetson is outside the top 340 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You do have a pair of guys and Ethan Copeland, Colin Kuhl. They've been able to step up with Jamie Phillips, top scorer, deal with injury, and these two guys combined for about 28 points per game. They combined to shoot about 40% from three-point range, and then you've been able to get some relatively good production here. Jake Johnson, who's been able to give you 9.5 points per game, but not a ton of rebounding for this team. Outside of Kuhl, you don't have a single guy that gives you over 4.1 rebounds per game. And for Austin Peay, what has been big for them is having Rashad Marshall, the Arkansas State transfer, step up, be able to hold it down low, as he's right now giving you about 6.5 boards, 15.5 points per game. Colin Parker has been able to give you 18 points. He shoots 42% for three. Anton Berkshire, he shoots 38.5% from the outside, and it's a Austin Peay team that has been able to do a really good job in terms of guarding the three-point line, top 125 team, in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. It can be at a little bit more down low. They're outside the top 240 with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but with the way that Austin Peay generates turnovers, I think that they should be a sizable favorite. I did set my line here at a 10.5. I'm seeing a lot of 9.5s out there. Personally, 9.5 is what I'm going to be looking to lay here, so I'm going to lay with Austin Peay, and I like the under. 3-6-6-09, 3-6-6-10. West Georgia is going to be playing against Queens NC, and Queens NC does find themselves as a 5.5 to a 6.5 point favorite total on this game, 162.5 to 164.5, and for Queens NC, I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with West Georgia. It's a West Georgia team that is going to be looking to push some tempo in terms of total possessions per game. This unit is checking in 75th in all of college basketball. Queens NC, they play high-scoring games. They're 85th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Just lackadaisical on defense. They're 44th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. West Georgia, well outside the top 275 as well, but it's a Queens NC team that's really been able to take off with their offense, 24th in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, albeit they are scoring about 17.7 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And for Queens NC, you've got 6 different guys that do give you double figures, and you've got the man on your side, and it's your man who's been able to give you 13 points, right around about 5.5 rebounds per game, but he's pretty much a lone guy on the roster that gives you over 5.1 rebounds per game. Avante Parker, 5.1 boards, 11.5 points per game, does shoot 45.5% from three. Jordan Watford has been able to shoot 39% from the outside, but it's a West Georgia team that away from home has been shooting above 34.5% from three. Sheldon Williams-Dryden is the top scorer in this game, 21 points, 9 boards, doesn't really pop it well from three, but Josh Smith shoots 35.5% from three. West Georgia is a top 175 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, getting pounded on the inside. They're outside the top 3 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but also for West Georgia, top 175 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They don't generate any turnovers whatsoever. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but have done a relatively solid job taking care of the ball. If Queens needs to cover this game at the free throw line, they're shooting in that neighborhood about 74.5%. That is a top 125 mark in the country, but I do think that West Georgia does enough to remain lively here. So I did set my line at a 4.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points, and I did set my total at a 164.5. So I do like this 162.5 to the over. 306, 611, 306, 612. Gardner Webb is going to be playing against High Point. This is from ETSU's home court, and for High Point, I hope to not be a low point as a 25 to a 25.5 point favorite. So on this game, it is 159.5 to 161.5. I set my line at 25.5, so 25 or less is my max lay on High Point. Gardner Webb has just been awful. They're outside the top 345 in terms of points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis and rebound percentage. They're, for some reason, look to play up tempo, 97th in terms of total possessions per game. High Point has been playing fast, 60th in terms of total possessions per game, but man, this team is efficient. Right now, 9th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis and games played away from home. That actually goes into the top 8, and for High Point, they were dealing with the injury to Cameron Fletcher, who was their top scorer to begin the season. He has been passed up now by Scary Terry Anderson, but he's been able to come back, play some limited minutes for the team. You've got Hot Rod Martin, who's been able to give you 15 points, 3.5 assists per game. High Point just really good in terms of winning the turnover battle. Top 10 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense. Top 15 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and they're a top 5 team in terms of getting to the free throw line, and Gardner Webb is very, very much putting you on the free throw line. They're one of the worst foul teams in all of college basketball, also 364th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. The Jacob Hudson, Jacob Hogarth, they've been able to combine for about 21.2 points per game. They combine to give you about 11 rebounds per contest, but you just don't have a lot outside of that. Spence Sims has actually shot 44% from 3, gives you about 10 points per game, but as a whole, this team shoots just 31.2% from 3. That's outside the top 3 in the country, outside the top 285 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that this team is just going to get absolutely destroyed, so I did set a line of 25.5, 25 or less, going to lay with High Point, and made my total a 160.5, so we're between 159.5 and 161.5. Personally, would rather take the 159.5 to the under rather than the 161.5 to the over. 306, 613, 306, 614. You've got Charleston Southern They're on the road against Winthrop, and Winthrop does find themselves as a 4 to a 4.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 161.5 to 162.5. I set my line at 8.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Charleston Southern is just out winning the turnover battle. They're outside the top 285 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, on offense, on defense, bottom 15 team in terms of generating turnovers, and you do have a Winthrop team that has been a top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Winthrop has been able to have the Duquesne transfer and Kareem Rozier come in and give you about 13 points, 3.5 assists per contest. He has been rock solid, shooting 37.5% from three-point range. Cody Cluett, 13.5 points. He shoots 42% from three-point range. You've been able to have Dallin Berry, who actually used to play for Charleston Southern, give you about 10 points per contest as well. And then flip side, you've got a Charleston Southern team that has Alan Sumler, Bryson Blaine, who've been able to combine for about 36 points per game. And you've got a Charleston Southern team that when they've been at home, they've been an incredible three-point shooting team. Overall for the season, they're shooting about 36.2% from three-point range. That's a top 80 mark in the country, but that does fall off to about 34.5% when they're away from home. It is a Winthrop team that is going to give you some open looks in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, right around about 153rd in all of college basketball, but they've been able to do a pretty okay job in terms of guarding there, as Winthrop right now is allowing teams only shoot about 32.5% from three-point range, so that hurts a Charleston Southern team that does take over 50% of their field goal attempts from three-point. Charleston Southern, to their credit, pretty good with regards to their interior defense, top 50 team with regards to opponent's two-point shooting percentage. Reese Jones gives you about 2 blocks per contest, but I think that them losing the turnover battle, and also Charleston Southern shoots 64.5% at the free throw line. That is a bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. Winthrop is a team that's very willing to put you on the free throw line, top 75 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. I think that Winthrop gets the job done. Set my line at 8.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Charleston Southern, top 30 team in terms of total possessions per game. Think that you get an up-tempo game. Set my total 164.5. I like the over. 306-615, 306-616. You've got UNC Asheville. They're going to be playing against a Longwood. Longwood is a 1 to a 1.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 140 to 141.5, and with Asheville, I did set them as a favorite of 3.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. It's a Longwood team that's just not taking care of the ball. Outside the top 330 in terms of total turnovers on a per possession basis, Longwood has been just not great from three as well. They're outside the top 310 with regards to their three-point shooting percentage away from home at 30.1%. Meanwhile, you've got a Nashville team that's shooting over 36% from three away from home. That is a top 75 mark in the country. Now, Asheville has had a few shortcomings with regards to taking care of the ball as well. They're outside the top 240 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and you do have a bunch here in Longwood that has been a top 50 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Jaquai Hutchinson has come over from GW. George Washington has been able to give you 11 plus points per game, but then you've got Cameron Taylor on the flip side for Asheville giving you 19 points, 5 boards, 3 assists. Toya Solomon stands right around 6'9", and he shoots 34.5% from three, 16 points per game. Justin Wright has been Mr. Wright with about 17 points per contest. Now for Asheville, they only shoot about 68.5% of the free throw line. That's not great in a pressure spot, but they've been a top 225 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They do find themselves in the top 150 in terms of overall rebound percentage, and for Longwood, you're just not honestly getting a ton of rebounding for this team. They've been able to give themselves good second and third chances. They are a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, with having Elijah Tucker supply about 7 boards, 12.5 points per game, and then Joan Nazimi has been able to throw in there about 6 boards, 10.5 points per game. Lone 2 guys on the roster, though, that give you over 3.7 rebounds per game for Longwood. They've also been outside the top 300 with regards to bonus 2-point shooting percentage, so in the end, do think that Asheville finds a way to get the job done. Think that this is close enough for late fellas to get you over, as Asheville is actually now outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. Longwood more around 78, so semi-total 143.5. I do like Asheville here on the money line / as a very, very slim favorite. If it flips in, like the over, semi-total 143.5. Wrap things up with 306-617, 306-618. Presbyterian is going to be playing against Radford. Radford is a 1.5 to a 2.5 point favorite. So on this game, 145.5 with Radford. I did set them as a favorite of 4 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Radford team that is looking to play very up-tempo. Top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game. Radford is getting tattooed from three-point range. They're allowing teams to shoot right around about 35.3% from three overall. That falls to 33% away from home. And Presbyterian, they're allowing teams to shoot 35.5% from the outside, and Presbyterian's not taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and then you've got a Radford group that has been doing a nice job in terms of generating those turnovers. They're a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Presbyterian does not put you under duress, 249th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now Presbyterian has the edge down low. You've got a guy in Mr. Jalen Peterson, great name, 10.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, and then Jonah Pierce, 9.5 boards, 16.5 points per game. Carl Parrish, who's been able to shoot 40% from three, but still, it's an offense that has been very lackadaisical to say the least, and Presbyterian actually is a top 75 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. They shoot 68.3% at the free throw line. Meanwhile, you've got a Radford team that brings in a pair of guards from the ACC, as Del Jones began his career over at Clemson, 17 points. He's been able to shoot only about 31% for three, though, and then Dennis Parker's 39% three-point shooter, 18.5 points per game. It's a Radford team that is outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. That said, they've been shooting 34.5% per three, top 150 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. I do think that gets the job done here. Set Radford as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And here at a 145.5, set my total 146, like the over. And that'll wrap things up for the Friday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters the name does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to on this podcast via that 5-star review. I'm coming at you guys every single day with picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.